one more thing. How do you feel when you hear people say it was over 400 years ago? Isn't it time you let it go?
The fact that someone would even think about saying that's really annoying. It's so ridiculous. Like, every time black people bring up slavery, it's like, oh, but that was so long ago. Okay, fine, but there are still, slaves that are still alive today, that still have whip marks on their back, that still remember it, and their descendants have been told these stories, and it lives on. So it may have happened 400 years ago, but it's not gone anywhere. Why should we forget about it? Why shouldn't we, demand the respect that everyone else is free to demand? Like, with the Jewish community, no one's told them to get over the Holocaust. No one's told Americans to get over 9/11. But black people should keep quiet about slavery because that's done now. That makes people uncomfortable. So I think it's because people don't want to talk about it. It's easier to just be like, oh no, get over it. Like, that's done now, than to actually think, wow, maybe I've hurt this person, and I don't want to acknowledge that, so I'll run from it instead.
It is uncomfortable, and it is shameful for some people, so they don't want to acknowledge, they don't want to talk about it, they would rather it just went away. But how does it go away?
If you don't talk about it, it won't go anywhere.
Not only that, how does it go away when black people are still suffering? Like you said, it manifests in different ways. It may not be, oh, actually, look at America. It's what's happening in America. It's in 2020. It's almost like we've gone back decades.
It's like the whole civil rights movement has it feels like it's been like cut and removed, and then someone's just taken 2020 and stuck it.
Just slotted it in.
It's a lot.
I'm so interested by the shift in language of how you've changed from, like, you were really deliberate saying, I don't talk about racism now, I talk about microaggressions. And I wonder, is that because you've had a very brittle or fragile reaction from white people when you've said the word racism, and it's easier, or is it that you just feel that the word racism is not fit for purpose for the nuanced conversations that we need to have to change attitudes?
I think racism is kind of the overall thing, and then it manifests in so many different ways. So when you talk about racism, it's such a broad thing that, to me, it's easier to talk about specific aspects. So which is why if I tell people what a microaggression is, they'll be like, oh, and that's like a small bite-sized chunk, and that's easier to digest. Whereas if you say maybe to a white person or a non-brown person that, okay, what you've said is racist, I'm not racist because X, Y, and Z.
I have a black friend.
Whereas if you say right, okay, so that was a microaggression because you've just implied that, then I do find that they're more likely to listen. And then once I'm done talking about microaggressions, maybe I can find a different branch of racism to discuss. But I think for now, this is the thing that I focus on the most. I feel like it's more understandable.
It's also at an interpersonal level, like you can learn at that level, like that it's not, you can learn when I behave like this as a white person, it has these violent, harmful consequences. Whereas, and that's like a level that I can change things in my own behaviour. Whereas, like, end racism, the whole racist project is like, where do we start with that? Where do we even begin with that?
And if I may ask you one more thing, how do you, people say that Britain is not racist. It's not a racist society. What are your views on that?
It's a horrifically racist society, I think. But it's taken me, to my shame, a very long time to realise that. Like, I grew up feeling that it was not a racist country, and learning a version of Britain that Britain likes to tell itself about. We're very tolerant and we've got a lovely multicultural. It's actually a very comforting story about what this country is. And I think when the Brexit election happened, it was a really big wake-up call to me, where I was like, why? Like, because it seemed to me so flagrantly racist. Like, the campaign, the undertone of the Brexit campaign seemed so flagrantly racist to me that I was like, how have we got here? And then I realised, like, I haven't been paying attention. I have not been paying attention. And I think, so things that make me think that this is a really racist country is like learning about the Windrush generation and learning about the Windrush generation who came here and rebuilt the country after the Second World War, and the way that those people were treated when they first came over here, and now the way that their descendants have been treated by this government. Like, that's, you can't say that's not appalling. And then I think, you know, in thinking about like what can we change, some of the things, like when you were asking me about this and you were thinking, well, what could we do that was like about rural spaces and black faces and kind of like how is the countryside kept white? I found myself thinking about things that I didn't learn in school, like that I should have learned in school. So I went to art school. No one ever told me about Althea McNish, a Trinidadian born textile designer. She made these incredible, phenomenal designs for like Liberty, Dior, Hull Traders, and she hated the colour grey. She found this a very cold and grey place, but she deliberately brought this vibrant, deliberately tropical Trinidadian aesthetic to everything. But she also writes about, like, she gives us a vision of the British countryside that is centred on, that is coming from a non-white perspective, and I just think we don't see that. Like, why, if in schools we had storybooks that featured the artwork of Althea McNish that reframed the countryside and showed it through that other lens. Like she says here, I've always seen myself as a citizen of the world, and I draw my inspiration from the flora and fauna of every country and the art and artefacts of all cultures. My early exposure to the Caribbean environment led me to transform the tiny flowers of the British hedgerows into tropical exuberance. Throughout my exploration of art and nature, architecture and technology, I've always been conscious of the many strands of my ancestry and the variety of cultures I have inherited. And I just think that actually there's a story about Britain that's like, the countryside looks like this, but not like this. But we should hear this story of the countryside, and it would reframe it, I think, and make it a more welcoming and inclusive place.
Yeah. And about the Windrush generation, not many people knew about them. Not many people knew about the contributions that they made to this country. Not many people knew that they were actually invited to come here and rebuild this country. And as soon as that, the mother country, and as soon as they were no longer needed, then the attitudes of the British people towards them changed. It's like, go back to where you came from.
And it's like, well, I was born
brought
here.
Me here. Yeah, you brought me here. I was born here. I don't know any other place. Where do you want me to go? You know?
And that image, that self-image that Britain has of being like, you know, like one of the things that I definitely learned from my history education is like, oh, well, we ended slavery, we abolished slavery, we did it first, we got rid of slavery first. And then like when you dig into that myth, then you realise that in 2015 HMRC was still, like, taxes were still going to pay off the debt of what was paid to slave owners who basically lost profits when slavery was abolished.
So they were being compensated.
They were being compensated for their loss of money.
Also, Spain abolished slavery in the 14th century. So where the UK thinks that they abolished it first is beyond me. Interracial marriage was a thing happening in Spain before the UK abolished slavery on their colonies, but, you know. I digress.
Okay, so what do you think we can do as a way forward? I know we can't, the three of us.
What can we do?
As phenomenal as we are, we cannot eradicate racism on our own.
I think it's been interesting watching, so since the thing with Chris Cooper in New York Central
Mhm.
Park,
Yeah.
where this white woman tried to call the police on him because the reason
He was just bird
he was
watching,
bird
wasn't
watching,
he?
so he
Yeah.
was bird watching, and he was protective of. There's some ground nesting birds that are in that
Mhm.
part of the park, and her dog was off the leash, and it was not supposed to be. And he very politely just said, the birds are nesting here, and it sparked an interesting conversation. I mean, there's a bigger conversation about white women weaponising the police. That's another whole other thing. But this was more. It started a conversation about representations of black bird watchers because why. And there was a beautiful interview with him where he said the birds don't care what colour I am, and the birds should belong to all of us. And I think that there was a hashtag then on Instagram, and I think it was Black Birders Week, where basically all these different black bird watchers were kind of representing and claiming space in a kind of a geeky nature pursuit that has been associated for as long as I can remember with beardy white men. And it's like, no, why should everybody, genuinely everybody, not be part of that community of bird watchers? And I just thought that was a really interesting thing about representation, and suddenly seeing all those representations of black people bird watching. And there's like little initiatives like that springing up. And there's a book called Farming While Black that I really want to read, because it's about I think there's one black farmer that I know who's made that front and centre of their brand in the UK. One. And the name of the brand is The Black Farmer.
Okay. Well,
sorry, it's just me talking.
Very interesting conversation we've had. So, anything else you want to say in conclusion? No? And yourself?
No, I think I said enough.
So the walk to equality will be a long one. It's going to take more than the three of us. It's going to take everybody, black, brown, white. We need allies, people who are willing to lose their liberty for a cause, to see a just world. And that's what we should be marching towards. Thank you for being on the couch. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Couch. Bye.